Daily Wire. It just gets worse. Connecticut Parole Board pardons illegal migrant pedophile who said he might reoffend. Indeed. Take a look at this. A convicted pedophile and illegal migrant was released from a Connecticut prison last month after a sympathetic parole board mulled how to best help him avoid deportation. The Trump administration, the parole board decided, would not be able to get its act together fast enough to deport the illegal immigrant pedophile before his 30-day immigration detainer runs out. They can't elect a Speaker of the House, one board member scoffed. Gurino Maglore, how to pronounce it, 52, was serving 5 years in prison for felony second-degree sexual assault against a child between 13 and 15 years old. He was convicted of sexually assaulting the child on March 11, 2020, just as pandemic lockdowns were starting. During his parole hearing, he said he cannot promise he will not offend again. Maglore scored as a moderate to high risk on an evaluation used to predict whether a male sexual offender will reoffend. Despite those red flags, the parole board released him that day from Carl Robinson Correctional Institution north of Hartford. And once again, it's because they wanted to help him avoid getting deported. That's insane to me. This guy should just totally get you know what we do? We bring him to a plane, we put him on a plane and say, we're going to send you back to where you came from.
You know what? The other thing, too, is like, he's probably shocked that he's not getting deported because obviously he should get deported. And he's probably like, not cursing, these fools, you know, are just letting me back on the street so I can molest more children. How exciting for me. What idiots, what morons.
Not only is it idiotic, asinine, it's deeply immoral.
Yes.
I mean, this is the one thing going back to what we were talking about earlier. Nationalism is the moral imperative of every leader inside of a nation. And by that, I mean prioritizing the nation's interests and the people of that nation's interests. In what world does that prioritize the interests of our nation's people? It does not. And I think the immorality that we have seen on display, not only from Democrats and this kind of absurd, crazy, insane behavior, it's Republicans as well who have not prioritized the American people.
Well, I look at it largely as you go back a few generations, and the further you go back, the more Christian this nation was. The previous generations were turning the other cheek, tolerating behavior like this. And this is my point about the slippery slope. It exists. It exists no matter what you do. So right now, with the Supreme Court makeup that we have and the policies that are advancing, it seems to me like Obergefell will get overturned. Would you agree on that one?
I think so. I think there's some cases that I hope the Trump administration begins pushing immediately.
But they don't even need to. A liberal group will file a lawsuit on behalf of someone.
Right.
It'll get challenged to a federal court, the Supreme Court. It will have to do with the president of Obergefell, and the Supreme Court will say, we hereby overturn Obergefell. Gay marriage is no longer recognized in states unless they pass it in their legislators.
I wouldn't mind some of these cases being accelerated by the Trump administration actually generating some of these challenges ASAP.
I think I would like to see Bostock overturned before Obergefell.
You know what I want to see happen?
All of it? You just
no, day one. I'm serious. I think this is going to be one of the most important things that takes place in the 4 years that we have Trump, and hopefully we have power for 12 years, but we'll settle for 4 for right now. Trump needs to fire hundreds of thousands of federal employees and begin the process. No, begin the process by which it goes through the courts. He'll do that. The federal employee unions, which is insane. Yep. That we even have
there
public
shouldn't even be unions for government. That's
FDR
ridiculous.
Agreed with us, by the way. He thought that was
absolutely insane.
They'll sue. There'll be a stay. 18 months, 2 years, gets to the Supreme Court. And the fundamental question is this. Does the head of the Article II executive branch, the duly elected president of the United States, get to hire and fire whoever he wants to inside the Article II branch where most of the administrative state resides? And I think this Supreme Court will say, yes, we agree with you. And then Donald Trump can become the demolition man for the administrative state. But he's got to move on it quick because I think 18 months to 2 years might be a short route. It might be longer.
That's what Nancy Mace was saying.
What's your opinion on getting the bureaucracies out of D.C.? So
I love it.
Break up.
I want to send agriculture to North Dakota.
You mean how Facebook moved content moderation to Texas?
Well, we know that when corporations move their headquarters simply by moving them about 20% of the workforce, it's downsized simply by moving the headquarters. So move agriculture to North Dakota, move another department to Kansas, and break apart the Leviathan that's residing in D.C. right now. And by doing that, I think you reduce it by 20%. Right out of the gate.
Astounding.
And I think Trump might actually go for that approach I think there is kind of all of the above approach in regards to we have to deal with this bureaucracy. I think it is the thing. I think a lot of the issues that we're facing today in D.C., but the country writ large, have to deal with this massive bureaucracy that thinks it's going to dictate to the American people, this is how you're going to live your life.
Well, yeah, and they've been doing that for a while. And they haven't just been doing it in the U.S., but under the Biden administration and Obama, they were doing that globally. They were tying all kinds of funds to like, okay, now Hungary, you have a whole LGBTQ thing. And when the people in those nations push back, you know, the administrations get angry and, you know, start working with the subversive groups in that country to push their agenda forward. I remember I was at a UN thing on the status of women a couple years ago, and there were these women from Rwanda saying, why do you guys keep pushing abortion on us? We just had a genocide. We want our babies.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how America, the position that we have in the world right now, we can either be a great force for good
or evil,
or we can be a force for evil.
And we've been evil just too much.
We have, and we've gone in and we have started to deconstruct the moral and cultural fabric of these various countries because of the woke mind virus that has taken over in these bureaucracies in which they decide we're going to dictate not only to this country but to others around the world, with obviously strings attached to funding and to grants, that you're going to actually implement these woke agendas because we say so.
I think a lot of it has to do with the complete demolition of religion.
Yes.
You know, because if you look at the way that religion was practiced, the way that this is something I was just reading
Orthodox
about.
Christianity.
The way that like Orthodox religion is practiced, you know, Orthodox religion, Orthodox Judaism, you make everything in your life has to do with how you practice your faith. And so every basic thing is imbued with meaning. And so you go out into the world with confidence that you are practicing a life that is full of meaning and hope and faith just because of those small gestures. And when we take that away, we're all just out here struggling, trying to find meaning in something or other, and nobody can find it anywhere. And so they do this nonsense.
I think it was Sartre, French philosopher, who said a finite point without an infinite point of reference is pointless and absurd. And when you cut the cord to the transcendent, you do eventually devolve into this theater of the absurd in which you just make up things as you go. There aren't any absolutes. I think at some point, it was Francis Schaeffer, who I love, who once said, if there are no absolutes, society becomes absolute, and whatever society says at that moment is what is.
Well, and Sartre's play No Exit exemplified that.
So I think we do have to come. I mean, this country was founded on a common set of ideals and principles and values. And it would be nice if we got back to that, where we get a basic agreement on fundamental issues in which we say, these are right, these are wrong. Well, this is what the country was founded on.
If the government exists to facilitate a happy, successful, and fulfilled population, like, why doesn't it focus on normal families? Why is I personally, I have my own intuition as to why, but like, the idea of centering the marginalized lifestyles, you should be focusing on normal families, especially when everyone knows that the birth rate in the U.S. is on the decline and has been.
Demographic winter.
We should be doing everything that we can to encourage the population to have more kids, and we should have policies that endorse that.
Lefties' minds are going to melt when I say this, but we should look at Hungary's approach to what they're doing with policy. Again, this goes back to when you have political power, why don't you use it to actually implement things that are beneficial to society and actually cause fundamental change?
Yep.
I think Hungary spends about 5% of its GDP on actually promoting policies that strengthen the family, encourage growth of the family, and you're seeing it play out in their society. I'm like, we should do the same. We should spend a certain percentage of our GDP towards actually strengthening and promoting the traditional family and actually strengthening families, strong fathers, mothers, strong households.
This isn't an argument against Social Security or against the mandatory spending that we have, but like, if we can spend the amount of money that we spend on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, we can spend some money on young people, trying to encourage them to have children and raise them in a way that makes them want to have children of their own.
Libby, there was something you said about the idea of Orthodox religion being in our lives. And one of the things that, of course, Christianity, I think Judaism and some of the other Orthodox religions teach, is the idea of self-governance. And I remind people all of the time, we are a self-governing republic. And people think, well, that's great. The American people are governing themselves. Well, self-government is based off individual self-governance. And the idea of actually having a faith and religious influence on the idea that, yeah, at some point, someday, you're going to have to give an accounting to a transcendent creator. There are eternal rewards and punishments for that behavior. The idea of self-governance then leads to better self-government in which people are governing themselves. And the more people govern themselves internally, the less government you're going to need to actually bring order.
But we don't do that now. I mean, that's like, you know, we were talking about a little bit like that before the show. We've eradicated the notion of shame. We've elevated our most base desires to our entitled right. Like that's what we believe.
Celebrated it.
Yeah, we've celebrated it. We, you know, one thing that we've inherited from reality TV shows is this idea that if you don't like someone, you should be a total horror to them all the time. You should just be mean to them to their face. And that's ridiculous too. You know, there's this idea that you're supposed to show up at Thanksgiving and be nasty to your family because you disagree with them about federal politics. I mean, come on. Like, is there anything more stupid than arguing with your family over federal politics?
I feel blessed.
It's ridiculous.
Because I've got liberal family members and they aren't insane and it doesn't come up.
Yeah.
We just eat turkey.
Oh,
I think that's good.
That's good.
You know what it is, though? I do think it's the older generation, the grandparents who are just like, stop.
We're not doing this.
Shut up. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
And I have concerns for when they pass on what's going to end up happening. Because I do think a lot of the political bifurcation in this country, it's massive in the younger generations. Yeah. It's moderate in the millennial, middle-aged generations, Gen Xers. And then it is almost not existent in the oldest generations. So if you look back at, you know, when boomers were in their 30s or whatever, which is like, what, the 90s, the differences between the Democrat and the Republican Party were slim. Yeah. You look today, it's massive. And despite the fact that the parties are still largely run by the same people, you do have younger people coming in, and the younger people tend to be the firebrands. Yep, totally on opposite ends, not getting along. So when the older generation moves on, I don't know what happens to this country. I mean, maybe right now with the concern I have is Donald Trump only won because of one generation. And you know what generation that was?
Gen X.
That's right.
That's right. We saved the world, baby.
We sure did. And so Gen X is going to have to hold on with a death grip.
That's right.
And double down for the next 10 or 20 years because boomers will be leaving us.
I got my keys around my neck.
Can I say
Gen
one
Z
thing?
and Gen Alpha, man, we need to make sure that these kids get access to good, clean information. And
Yes.
As an aside, I'm looking forward to seeing TikTok go belly up.
I don't think it's happening.
It's a drive-by shooting on TikTok.
I don't think it is. The Biden administration said they were going to leave it to the Trump administration to enforce
TikTok
the
is
ban.
choosing to shut down.
Yeah.
They're shutting down anyway.
They're choosing
Sunday.
to shut down. There's no bill forcing
What do you
them to
think
shut down.
the Supreme Court's going to say? I think they're going to.
The decision day was Wednesday.
Yeah, but they didn't decide.
Right, which means that nothing's going to happen until TikTok makes a decision to shut down.
Interesting.
They could theoretically do a preliminary injunction, but it sounds like
I don't think the
it
Supreme
sounds
Court
like the Supreme
believes
Court was saying, why would we?
Yeah, they
Congress
don't think
passed
the algorithm is speech. They don't think.
No, that China doesn't have free speech. That's it, period.
But they didn't buy it. The Supreme Court did not buy TikTok's argument.
Right, but the Supreme Court, many of the members actually said, yet no, China has no constitutional protected speech. That's it. Doesn't matter. Algorithm is meaningless. We don't give foreign countries free speech rights from foreign countries into the United States. So anyway, I digress. I was not trying to reignite the whole TikTok thing.
No.
I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's fascinating. I listened to all those arguments.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.